I know I've been on quite a few times, so I'll just give a brief summary. I am a human trafficking advocate and specialist. I specialize in domestic minor sex trafficking, which is children that are sex trafficked throughout the United States or commercially sexually exploited.
How do you talk to your children about human trafficking and things to keep out, things to, watch out for? Some children may be very young, but we've seen that it can happen to children who are very young. So how do you have that conversation with someone who's so young and may not understand entirely what you're talking about?
So it's tricky because the average age of a child who has been exposed to pornography is 8 years old. So that's a very, very, very young age, and we know that that's exploitation in itself, and it's really harming a child. Their chemistry in their brain changes. And so how do you have that conversation with an 8-year-old? And then we know that kids 11 and 12, that's when that's the average age to be approached by a trafficker or a predator. So each age is different ways of teaching a child. And so I would have parents and schools go in and have those organizations that specialize in that teach that, like ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children. They are amazing for what they do, because not only do they catch the predators, but they understand what's happening, and then they partner with organizations and survivor leaders and overcomers who have been through this, and to put on specific trainings for sex education, sex trafficking, commercial sexual exploitation. No Trafficking Zone, which is my organization, we also do that.
Okay. The next question I have is, you want to kind of implement techniques to help prevent your children from accessing certain websites, or like you said, if they're communicating with someone who they shouldn't be. How do you help your child feel like you're not crossing a boundary and maybe their privacy, but you're also doing your job as the parent to keep them protected?
So your kids are always going to feel like I'm a mom, and your kids are always going to feel like you're crossing a boundary, because they always think that they're right and they know what's best for them, and they're strong enough and they're smart enough, and in many cases they are. But unless you think like a predator, it's really hard to be prepared for that. So one of the things that parents need to do is, you're going to make your child upset, and your goal should not be your child's best friend when they're a teenager. Your goal is to be your child's parent. Your kids need to respect you. They need to understand that they have to respect you. But they also do need to know that they can trust you. Sometimes when you just want to be your kid's friend, then you don't want to say no, you don't want to overpry. And in this day and age, there's 7 billion people on the planet, and they all have access to your child. Many of them do with the internet. So being a helicopter parent, putting safeguards in place, putting apps in place, like a Bark, like a 360, that's gonna notify you and alert you when inappropriate conversations or content is happening. That's how those are the ways that I would be prepared. And I'd also normalize having uncomfortable conversations with my child at a young age, meaning these are what your body parts are. These are the proper names for them. It's not embarrassing, because kids get so embarrassed, or they never hear from it from their parents, and they're like, ew, that's gross, I don't want to say it. No, it's your body. And when you start having conversations like that, it's okay. And when you also let your children know it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to mess up. When I was your age, I made mistakes. I did mess up. I'm not going to be disappointed in you. I love you. I just need for you to tell me the truth. And if you can't communicate with me, go find someone that you can, and then bring that person to me.
Can you explain a little more about Bark and what those apps particularly do?
The great thing about Bark is that it's also in a lot of schools and school systems. So it actually lets schools know when inappropriate things are happening on their school campuses and reporting them. For us, that's really important, because with No Trafficking Zone, we have the No Trafficking Zone Act, which is for schools, which was SB 1831 for commercial exploitation and sex trafficking. That is very important, because when the app is with schools, parents, and students, it can communicate all three together, that the demographics of those areas. One thing I really want to talk about too is that parents need to talk to their kids in schools. Like, we need classes for boundaries. We don't learn in this country anymore about boundaries and why boundaries are healthy, because people overshare on social media. They overshare now in their life. They talk to strangers online. And so it's very easy to push our boundaries and have us do very uncomfortable things. But we need to tell children and our youth, as soon as you feel uncomfortable, it is fine. You absolutely should say, I don't feel comfortable with that. And if the person takes offense to it, then there's something wrong with them. Like, you did nothing wrong. And we have to teach our kids to be confident in trusting their instincts.
I know we spoke a lot off camera about, not forcing your children to maybe hug or say hello to someone they don't feel comfortable doing. What would you tell the parents who maybe feel like their child is maybe being disrespectful by not saying hello or not hugging them or greeting them as they would?
Well, I think it's crazy to think that a kid is being disrespectful because they don't hug an adult or another child. Some people just aren't huggers. Some people are, they don't like germs. They don't shake hands. Some people, different cultures, bow. They don't want to touch. And I think that in this society, we need to teach our kids not just about boundaries, but that to respect other people's opinions and their boundaries. So if I don't want to hug you, or if my culture is bowing, bow back, or if you don't feel comfortable, then don't do that. And I'm not saying be defiant, but what I'm saying is if you do not feel comfortable hugging someone, you should not hug them. Whether it's your uncle, your grandma, your grandpa. We know many kids who have been sexually assaulted and molested, majority by someone they knew, by someone their family knew. And if we taught kids from the get-go, hey, you don't have to hug Aunt May or Uncle Jim. You don't have to sit on their lap. You don't have to, if someone touches you or does something that makes you feel uncomfortable, you tell us right away. You won't make us upset. Like, we want to know. And the reason why those conversations have to be had is because kids that we have worked with, survivor leaders, overcomers, a lot of times said they didn't feel comfortable saying that their uncle or their aunt or their parents' best friend or their coach or their teacher at school was touching them. And it did start out with a pat on the shoulders and then a massage. And again, it's that gradual grooming and boundary pushing, and because they were afraid. And so we need to tell our kids to not be afraid, to let us know right away when they don't feel comfortable and when someone is being inappropriate. And then we need to teach those parents, no matter who that person is, whether it's a cop, whether it's someone very powerful or not, that the action needs to be taken against the perpetrator.
Okay. The last and final question I have is what resources are available to parents who want to keep their children safe from any trafficking?
So I would say, again, for parents, like if they went to notraffickingzone.org, they would fill out a form. We'd let them know, fill out where they want us to go to teach them. There's other organizations that also do it. Sometimes law enforcement does it. Sometimes law enforcement and victim service agencies do it together. And if they just Google that in their state, all of that information will come up.
I want to go ahead and thank you, Jacquelyn, for joining our podcast once again. I want to thank all our viewers for joining in on Unmuted. Now what? We'll see you guys on the next episode. Thank you.